guys, Tim Bratz here with Legacy Wealth Show. Appreciate you guys joining us. I've got a good buddy of mine, Mr. Brian Page, here with us. Brian, say hello to everyone.
Hey, what's going on? Thanks for having me.
So Brian's out of Charleston, South Carolina, and we've never connected when we were in Charleston, but I've been back up here in Cleveland for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years now. And was getting into the vacation rental stuff a couple years ago, connected with Brian, and we've stayed in touch ever since. And so now I'm going back down to Charleston, South Carolina. We'll be hanging out a little bit more, man. So, Brian, I'm going to give a light background on you, and then I just want to dive in, have a good conversation. So Brian was a real estate investor, went through the crash, kind of took some punches and rolled with the punches during that whole time, realized he needed to get into something that was really more cash flow based and a lot less liability and responsibility and some of those kinds of things, and got into arbitraging Airbnb. He's got a big program called BnB Formula. I actually used it. It's got awesome content, awesome delivery in that side of things. And, and obviously, so you know how to make money, dude. Like, you figured it out. You figured out how to make money very creatively. You figured out how to make money in the info space as well. And then I know you're passively investing and kind of putting your money and stashing it to create some residual and passive income. And man, I want to dive into all of it. So why don't you give everybody kind of higher level or deeper overview on you and your background, and then we'll go into some of the conversation side of things.
Yeah. Well, I came out of college not sure what I wanted to do. I had a couple different jobs that I was not very good at. I got fired from a couple different jobs, realized pretty quickly that I wasn't really employable and that I should probably be an entrepreneur. And so I just tried all kinds of businesses that none of them really worked all that well. And it was actually during a summer internship that I was at Hilton Head in South Carolina here. And I was working for Hilton Resorts because I was a hospitality major. And it was the last thing I had to do before I graduated. And I started basically spending my time when I wasn't working at Barnes & Noble just reading books. And I read as many books as I could get on real estate. And I decided real estate investing was like going to be my thing. And so I got into that right after graduating school and started flipping homes and acquiring properties and doing some construction, you name it, lease options, all that kind of stuff. And so that was what I did for many, many years.
03, 05?
Yeah, right around, 2001, 2002 is when I started investing.
Okay.
And so that was my first taste of getting cash flow. I had enough properties, rental properties, that I could basically quit my job. So I quit my job and I was just living off those properties. I wasn't making a whole lot, but I was living off those properties and then spending my time flipping other properties. And it was great. And I loved real estate. I still love real estate. But then, I went through the big crash like a lot of people did, and that changed everything for me.
So going through that, what's one of the things, obviously we're at a peak right now, right? And like, there's people investing in real estate that probably shouldn't be investing in real estate.
People don't believe we are, but yeah, we're
right. But when you're sitting there at a restaurant and the waitress is giving you insights on how to invest in real estate, or your barber's cutting your hair and telling you that they're looking to invest in real estate, that there's people who should not be in real estate that are all of a sudden making money in real estate, and something's going on. That usually means the market's a little bit too heated up, and it's time to either sell or get out, or just be cautious, start stockpiling cash, because things are going to shift. Are they going to shift? Like, nobody has a crystal ball about when that's going to happen or how hard it's going to happen. But real estate's cyclical, so it's always going to go up and down, and it's been going up for 10 years now. So what's something that what did you realize the people who either were able to ride out that wave of the 2008 crash, and then the people who went completely bankrupt or gave all their properties back and lost all their net worth, fell on their face, and had to go out and get a job? Like, what was the difference between the people who could sustain that blow and were able to ride that, just kind of ride out the storm and then actually make it out better on the back end because they were still in a good position, versus the people who lost everything? Like, what have you seen the difference there?
I would say leverage is the big differentiator. Those who are highly leveraged during a downturn are going to get slaughtered, and those who are not are going to probably survive. And I also saw a big difference between residential and commercial. Now, I'm no expert on commercial, but I do know that people had a big commercial portfolio. We know that those properties didn't just simply go 50% vacant when the downturn happened. People were still doing fine with commercial properties. But residential properties, you couldn't sell them. Nobody wanted to buy them. Suddenly their value is cut in half. I mean, that happened across the board. So if you're a residential real estate investor and you're not sitting on a large equity number in your portfolio, that's a big mistake.
Yep.
So I believe so. And that's where everybody was highly, highly leveraged. I was highly leveraged, and I was getting into speculative real estate. So building property on spec with no buyer in mind. And that works great until the musical chairs,
Yeah.
game stops.
Yeah.
So I made a mistake there because I didn't know. I had never experienced a cycle, and we are going into another cycle now. So I think not being highly leveraged and being in commercial real estate is a much safer play than residential.
Yeah. I think you got some really good points there. Like what I've seen too is always buy wholesale, right? When you're buying at a retail price and hoping tomorrow it's worth more, and then it's not, you're in a tight spot. So if you're always buying at a wholesale price, off market, direct to seller, negotiating with motivated sellers, and if you're at a low enough basis, you have options. It's kind of like we go into a golf tournament, we're playing in a scramble. There's 4 of us hitting the ball. Guess what? You got some options, man. Like 3 people could totally knock it into the woods, but somebody's in the middle of the fairway. The more options you have, the more likely you're going to be in order to, reduce the blows that you're going to take. And you got some different strategies there. So you can either rent things out, you can sell it, you can refinance it, you can figure out other creative strategies like the whole lease option or seller financing or Airbnb or like whatever that looks like. If you're at a low enough basis, that's what gives you those options. And so 100% agree with you on that. And the speculation versus cash flow is one of those things that I saw too. People who bought for like the resale and hoping that the values, and they're speculating on what the values could be worth.
Bigger fool theory. There's always a bigger fool that's going to buy it from me, and that's why I'm buying it, because I know someone else will buy it from me. And that's not smart. If you're buying something that today will cash flow, tomorrow will cash flow, it'll cash flow 10 years from now, it'll cash flow in a downturn, that's a good investment.
Yep. I love it. I think cash flow at the very least, even if values go to zero, if you have somebody in your unit paying for your operating expenses, paying for your debt service payment, and putting a little bit of cash in your pocket, you're going to be able to ride out that storm. You're going to be okay. You're going to come out clean on the back end. And probably not only will you survive, but you're going to be one of the thrivers, because you're going to be one of the only bankable people who have cash flow and assets still on the books, and one of the only people that were still able to get loans when.
And you can look historically too. When you're looking at a commercial property, you can look back at the rent rolls for the last 20 years, and you can say, oh, what did it do during the last 2 major downturns? Okay, well, the occupancy rate dropped a little bit, but this thing still made money. It still had people living in it. And so therefore it's pretty safe to assume that that's still going to happen in the future. That's very different than being somebody who's buying a $300,000 house retail, hoping that you're going to sell it for $350 in a few months or in 12 months. That's just not smart. So I think that's where you got to be very, very careful. And everybody was leveraged. I mean, I was highly leveraged because you could put down almost nothing or $0 and buy a property and buy another property and just continue doing that. And with commercial, you can't do that. I mean, you have to put down a larger chunk of money, even if you're getting it from someone else. You have to come in there with a strong down payment to get the deal done. So,
and it's okay. Or what I've seen is it's okay. Like if you're going to go raise 100% of the money, that's okay. If you're not buying a $10 million building for $10 million, if you're all in for $6 million, and you're leveraging 100% of that $6 million, but it's worth $10 million, then you're still at a low enough basis. It's almost like you're buying a $10 million building and stroking a check, a downstroke for $4 million. And now you're lowering your leverage, or you could just buy it at the right price point and you're in a good spot too. So
agreed.
Tell me about the pivot that you made then. Market shifts and you decide, hey, I need some cash flow, right? And so you get into this whole Airbnb starts going and you see an opportunity there. What was that pivot and that mindset shift like?
Well, that was huge because for years I sat on the sidelines. I became a millionaire in my 20s, had a big portfolio of real estate, was doing really well, and then 08 hit and I was just decimated. Everything was decimated for me personally, and actually everybody that I knew as well. And so I was just for years sitting on the sidelines, didn't know what to do. I took a couple jobs here and there just to pay the bills. I really had nothing going for myself. And I knew I had to get back in the game, but I really wasn't really excited about getting back into the residential real estate game. And just by chance, my roommate had moved out of my apartment, my 2-bedroom apartment that I was renting. I took his room, put it on Airbnb, like a lot of people probably do. And I was making money with it, but I enjoyed that cash flow, but I didn't know how to scale it. I knew that there was opportunity here. And it was nice to have that taste of cash flow again that I remembered from having years prior. And it was just a chance encounter with a guy on a plane. I was on a work flight, and I sat down next to this guy who is an angel investor. He buys and sells companies. He invests, huge sums of money into startups and that kind of thing. Very, very smart guy. And he started asking me all these questions about my Airbnb. And I couldn't figure out why he was so, interested in somebody like me in my little room. And the reason he was asking all these questions was because he said, there's a lot of potential here for you to scale this thing. And I said, well, I know that, but I don't really have any desire to buy property. I don't want to go into debt again. I'm done with all that. And he said, no, you don't have to buy properties. You just have to control properties. And you can control them through leases. You can control them through agreements with the owners. And that one idea was like, wow, okay, now I can do this. You're right. So I went home immediately, leased a property, put it on Airbnb, made 300% more. Did that the next month and the next month and the next month. And every single property made about 300, 400% more than what it cost me to rent. And I just felt like I was printing money, and I was doing it with other people's properties I didn't own. And it was just amazing. And that's kind of the beginning of where I start getting into this whole world of short-term rentals.
It's wild, man. Just having a conversation, just open up your mouth, talking to a stranger, the opportunities that come. Like, a lot of people are like, stranger danger, stay away from strangers. And like, everybody's a stranger before you met them and became friends with them, like there could be a stranger that has the next $100 million idea for you, right? You just got to open up your mouth, go talk to them and network and just communicate,
One interaction can change everything. That's my belief. One interaction, one relationship can change everything.
Totally. So you go down the path. Did you read any books on this stuff? You just kind of school of hard knocks about it and try to,
No, there were no books. So when I started doing this was quite a few years ago. I started trying to figure out how to scale an Airbnb business. There were no books about it at all. There were no YouTube videos at all. Mm-hmm. There was nothing online. I was looking. I was like, there's got to be somebody teaching this. And there was nobody teaching it. And so I thought, whoa, that's an opportunity. And I know at that point, I was already making about $300,000. That first 12 months, I was making about $300,000 a year with these properties that I was leasing. And people started reaching out to me because I basically just at that point, I'd already quit my job. I started traveling the world. I was traveling, 15, 20 countries a year, just traveling and living the life, having a great lifestyle. And people would reach out to me and say, what are you doing? Like, how did you go from where you were to now you're just like jet set and you don't seem to be working at all? And I said, I don't know, I'm creating all this cash flow on Airbnb, and people started asking me to teach them. And so when I realized nobody was teaching it, I thought, you know what, I should create a course. And that I created my course, and that was called BnB Formula. And then that has now we've had 7,000, 8,000 people go through that course all over the world. It's been amazing.
So tell everybody about your strategy, like what that looks like.
Yeah.
Quick overview on that.
Okay. Well, there's two main ways to do this. You can lease or you can partner. So leasing is simply you're leasing it like any other tenant would lease the property, but you're getting permission instead of living in the property to then put short-term renters in there. So I just say, hey, Tim, I want to rent your property that you have here on the market, and you're asking $1,000 a month. I'll pay you that, and I'll take great care of your property, and I'll professionally clean it every couple times a week and all that. And I'll pay my rent on time and, respect your property, but I'm not going to live in it. So let me tell you what I'm going to do with it. And I explain to you what I'm going to do with it. And you may say yes, you may say no, but it's just a numbers game. You ask enough people, some people are going to say yes. So that's kind of how I did it. I do it. I pitch it, and I just pay you what you're asking for, $1,000 a month. And I show you why I'm the best person for your unit. Now, if you don't say yes to that, I can very quickly pivot and say, well, Tim, what if I could show you how to make $1,500 a month on that unit with no extra work on your part? None, no extra work, no extra liability. Would you be interested? And Tim's like, yeah. So I say, great. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to list your unit on Airbnb. Now there's no lease involved. Keep in mind in this kind of interaction, there's no lease involved. There's no deposit involved. It's just, I'm going to come by tomorrow, take photos of your property. Let's assume this is a furnished property we're talking about. And then anything we make on Airbnb, we're going to split 50-50 over that $1,000. So if we make $3,000, you get $1,500 because I'm giving you the first $1,000. Well, actually, it would be more than that, right? It'd be first $1,000 goes to you, and that next $2,000 is split 1,000. So you can make $2,000 on this $1,000 unit. So there's no downside for you. It's only a month-to-month agreement. So at any point you can say, Brian, I don't like this. I want to walk. It doesn't work anymore for me. And I'm focused on people with furnished properties. Now you could furnish it if you want to, put a few $1,000 in and furnish it if that unit is vacant. But that's the idea. You're either leasing it and getting all of the profit for yourself, or you're partnering and getting some of the profit for yourself. Either way, you don't have to own it. There's no down payment. There's no big money involved, any of that kind of stuff. So for those who are okay with the quote risk of doing a lease, which I don't see it as risky at all, you sign a lease. If you feel that's too risky, you partner with an owner. Those are the two main models. There's a couple
Yep.
other models, but those are the main ones.
And obviously model number one is there's more upside potential because you're signing a lease and you're keeping the delta above that, the whole 3,000.
Yeah.
Or you partner up with the owner. If you don't make enough money, they don't make any money. You don't make any money. There's not really any downside risk to that.
There's no downside risk. There's no
risk
long-term. Yeah, there's no long-term commitment for me as the person running the B&B. But don't get me wrong, there is real money in doing partnerships. So I got a student named Tia. She's on the West Coast. She's in Washington State, and I think she's about to crack $500,000 a year on Airbnb, and she only partners with owners. So she's killing it. There's ways to kill it that way too. But I like leasing because you get to keep all of the profit for yourself. And to me, it's not a downside to sign a lease at all because I already know they're going to be profitable.
Do you have a lot of students that are buying property as well and then just doing it on their own properties?
I do. So I have no problem with buying properties. I don't love debt. I don't like a lot of debt. And I don't think people should leverage and put down the minimum down payment to buy a property. But to answer your question, yes, a lot of people are real estate investors who come into my program and they want to acquire, they want to build wealth by owning the properties, which is great because you can pay them off extremely fast. And I am now buying properties again. I'm buying them with cash, but you could buy them and then pay them off really quickly with a loan if you wanted to. It's just the main way that I started teaching this was kind of the property hacking lease method, although that's not the only way. So yeah, if your goal is to build wealth, then you should probably be acquiring properties. How you do that is your business. I like to do it, where I have a large equity position or all cash.
Yeah.
And the really amazing thing is if you are buying property to do Airbnb, we're talking tremendous equity buildup very, very fast. We're talking like 24, 36, maybe 48 months to pay off a property. That sounds insane, but it's totally doable. I'm doing that right now.
Now, when you're looking to buy property, though, you don't underwrite it with the 3x rents that you think you can get on Airbnb. You're underwriting it with whatever the normal rental rate would be, because there's a little bit of risk in, municipalities coming in, changing regulations, and saying, hey, you can't do Airbnb in this area anymore, right?
Well, if you mean by what is the downside if I were to turn it into an Airbnb and then I can't later do Airbnb? I guess that's dramatically cut back the potential income, but I've already owned the property at that point. So it's just, I still own it free and clear. I still have that asset. But no, I'm going into areas where I'm going into areas that I don't foresee any changes in the laws. There are cities that are transitioning. There are cities that it's very difficult to do this in, but 90% of towns and cities, it's not.
Interesting. Are you finding people are having more success from like vacationers coming in and hanging out and visiting a downtown Charleston with the spouse for a long weekend? Or are you seeing more like corporate kind of rentals where people come in Monday through Thursday for work and then they roll out?
Well, that's a good question. Well, I live in Charleston and have listings here, but I'm in 3 different states. So I'm in Arizona, Florida, and South Carolina. So it's a big misconception that you have to be in a tourist destination or that Airbnb people are tourists. They're generally not. The majority of people on Airbnb are just traveling for any other reason that you would travel and stay in a hotel: business, meeting family, going somewhere, relocating for work. There's all kinds of reasons people travel, and tourism is just one of them. So while I live in a destination where it might be weighted very heavily towards tourism, there are other people I have students in places that you've never heard of, small towns where nobody goes there for tourism, but yet they're killing it because they have an Airbnb where you can rent a 3-bedroom for less, 75% of what it costs for a 1 room in a hotel. So the value proposition is good, and it doesn't have anything to do with tourism. So it works in tourist towns. It works in non-tourist towns. It works in everyday vanilla, places. And it strangely and surprisingly works in very small towns. This is something I didn't know when I first started teaching this. I wasn't sure if it was going to work for people in towns of 5,000 people, but it does.
Yeah.
And the reason is because even in towns of 5,000 people, some of those small towns, there are no hotels. So if you're traveling to that town to visit family or be in a wedding or whatever, where are you going to stay? There's no hotels there.
Yep.
So, I have students in very small towns that are doing quite well. So there's no correlation. It doesn't have to be a certain size city for it to work. It's just, the question is, do people travel there for any reason, need a place to stay? Then they're going to use Airbnb.
Yeah, man. Are you using any other short-term vacation rental websites as well, or just Airbnb?
We are using VRBO on some of the high-end luxury properties. So when you get up in the multi-million-dollar properties, VRBO is a better option in some ways.
And that's more vacation, longer term stay as well,
It's
right?
longer term. It's also higher end properties, although Airbnb has a lot of high end properties as well. But what I teach is only to stick with the platform of Airbnb, and that's more of an advanced strategy to get into. You
Hmm.
know, when you're getting into an owner that wants $10,000 a month for their property, they're more sophisticated, and you got to be able to show how you're going to cover that. That's not something I tell people to do when they're starting out.
Yeah.
So the short answer is Airbnb is the Amazon of its industry. Yeah, you know, if you could do a business on eBay, but why would you when there's Amazon? Just do Amazon. So I
Right.
teach people just do Airbnb. Later down the road, you can consider other platforms. But is it necessary to do other platforms to do really, really well? No, it's not. You can just do it all on Airbnb.
When I was looking to get into vacation rentals, obviously that's when we connected and
Yeah,
paid you to consult with me, bought your course,
yeah,
and got a lot of awesome strategies and tips and stuff. I went more the VRBO route of buying some vacation rentals outside
yeah.
of Disney World and all that kind of stuff, and have implemented a lot of your strategies. And we're in the top 1% of all
Good.
vacation rentals in Orlando. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, so we're having a lot of success in that. Now it's Orlando's just one of those markets where it's like so overdeveloped and it's
Yeah,
really hard because there's so much inventory, so the prices are getting compressed. So it's a little bit tough from
yeah.
that standpoint. But I got buddies who are in those working class, middle America type cities who are just crushing it with Airbnb right now
Yeah.
because of that. So yeah, interesting stuff. So tell me, here's the thing though, like nobody here wants a job, right? You're unemployable. I'm unemployable. I don't want to go and trade my time for money. I don't do
Yeah.
anything personally unless it's got a residual component and a passive component to it.
Agreed.
You're not the one going out and checking on properties and turning them over and all those kinds of things. How have you been able to set up systems and automations and put those things in place so that way it's not you, so that way you can go and travel?
That's a good question because I'm totally a believer in that. I do not want to do anything that I can't outsource or automate. So,
Mhm.
and that's residual. I agree with that as well. So, when you are doing Airbnb at scale, if you're doing one or two Airbnbs, you can do it yourself. It's no big deal. It's a little
Mhm.
side hustle. That's fine. But if you're going to scale it, you have to think in terms of what do the hotels do? Because everything a hotel does, you have to do spread out across a whole bunch of properties. So you're going to have to get the linens changed out, get the property clean, check the guests in and out, answer their questions, bring them extra towels, you know, all those things. Do pricing, maybe do discounts, maybe, you know, all those kind of things have to be handled. There's maintenance issues that come up if somebody breaks something or something doesn't work. So all those things are essentially they're very different than property management because property management is not quite the same thing. So this is
Mhm.
very different because it's more you're running a hotel. So when you run a hotel, you need to have a front desk. In a real hotel, you have a front desk. Well, in this world of Airbnbs, we have a virtual front desk. It's a concept that I came up with that essentially allows you to outsource 99% of the day-to-day tasks to a virtual service or a virtual person like a VA, virtual assistant.
Mhm.
And you can hire these people. There's people all over the world now that specialize in doing nothing but managing Airbnbs. You can hire a VA and they will run your account for you. And then they'll talk to the cleaners. They'll talk to the handyman who's in your town that's going to come fix things if they need to be fixed.
Do they charge the 15, 20, 25, 30% that a lot of the vacation rental companies do?
No, not at all. You pay them for their time. I mean, the Philippines, $5 an hour. In the US,
That's
$10
great.
an hour. So
That's
you're
great.
just paying them for their time. So it's extremely cheap. Or you pay them just for their number of listings they're managing because sometimes you can't really calculate how much time
Yeah,
they're
it's
going to
hard to
spend
do, right?
just doing messages here and there. But the idea is you want to get it off your plate so you're not, there's now somebody between you and your listings. And there's also services that do this online. There's a service called Guesty. Guesty is based out of
Mhm.
Israel, and they can manage as many listings as you have, and they charge an X percentage of whatever you bring in. So the idea is that you want to get all the day-to-day tasks outsourced to someone or to a service so that the only job that you have is to go acquire more properties. That's the only job that you really have. And maybe being there when they're set up and staged. I think that's really important to be there and pick out what's going to go in the properties. But other than that, once you set it up, you do not have to be involved in the day to day. And that's what's really important because your time per hour goes way, way up. We're talking a business where you can do 6 figures or 7 figures a year and yet not have really any involvement in the day to day. Especially when you say, okay, I'm going to stop. I'm not going to acquire any more properties now. There's really not much involvement at all. So for me, it's 2 to 3, 4 hours a week. I'd say for a typical student, about the same if they do it correctly.
Mhm.
And that's having a bunch of listings, you know. So when you start out one or two listings, you want to do it all yourself because that's how you learn.
Mhm.
You don't want to. It's kind of like buying an apartment complex. You don't want to
Yep.
buy your first apartment complex never having seen it. Although you can buy apartment complexes like that, you should
Yep.
probably go see it. You should get
Yeah.
yourself on those properties and see what they're
Yeah.
like before you do your first deal. It's the same thing. And then now I'm going across different states. So I have properties that I've seen, but I've never gone to since I've acquired them, like in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't have any involvement in the day to day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's totally possible to go across state lines and do that, even outside the country, because there's lots of opportunities outside the country. So in a nutshell, to answer your question, yes, you want to outsource everything so you're not creating a job for yourself. You want to be the hotel owner, not the front desk clerk.
Are you leaning heavily on like AirDNA and any like the the people with the algorithm, all these companies with algorithms, all the data, like you're in a
Yeah,
very highly data driven, where it's very available data
yeah.
on where are rates and where everybody else pricing and which days of the week or which days of the month are spiking and all that kind of stuff. Are you leaning on any of those companies? I think there's some companies that'll actually take that and they'll say, hey, pay me, I think it's like 3% of your gross on a monthly basis, and we'll guarantee you you'll make an extra 15%, of what you're
Yeah.
already making. Just pay us a little bit of a difference. We're gonna make more money, and they're just heavily data driven, and because they can jump up the price, reduce the
Yeah.
price, and they do a lot of that stuff for them. Do you use any of those companies?
I don't use those particularly, but I do use AirDNA.
Mhm.
AirDNA is an amazing data analysis company, and they basically just aggregate all the data from Airbnb to be able to give you a comp or a CMA, essentially. So just like a comparative market analysis that you would get when you're trying to figure out what a property, let's say you're going to flip a property and you want to know what
Mhm.
the after repaired value is. It's the same thing with AirDNA. They can tell you what the potential cash flow is per day and per month on a property. And that's highly, highly valuable. So like the last property that I acquired here in the Charleston metro area, they said you're going to make roughly this much per month. And the first month I listed, I made exactly, within a few dollars, exactly what they predicted. And they just take the similar listings and they can calculate it based on what they think it can make. So it's, you spend some money on one of those reports, but it's well worth the $50, whatever it costs to buy the report,
Yeah.
especially for people that like data. So yeah, there's some companies out there that'll do that. You can put in a specific address and they'll tell you this is what we think this address would earn. So it's gotten a lot more sophisticated these days,
Love
especially
it.
if you're going to buy in other areas that you don't like. If I was going to buy in Orlando, for example, I could go and buy a report for Orlando
Mhm.
on that site, and it's very, very valuable.
What about so a lot of the people that listen to Legacy Wealth Show, they're all about buying real estate, commercial real estate, apartment buildings,
Yeah,
and building wealth that way. One of the things that I have not done this yet, but one of the things I'm looking at doing is I have some really nice properties, some new stuff that I'm developing down in coastal South Carolina, coastal Georgia. That'll be popping in the next like 6 to 9 months, and I have some other buildings that are just I'm getting rid of the more B minus C plus kind of properties. I'm sticking only to B plus, A minus, A class kind of areas. um, and so but a lot of the stuff that I invest in is secondary, tertiary type cities, like Charleston, South Carolina, Savannah, Georgia,
yeah,
Macon, Georgia, outside of Atlanta, and into like rural Georgia. Well, I say rural, still 200,000 people in the certain towns that I invest in, but Cleveland, Ohio, those kinds of markets. So I think there's a demand there, and I think my properties are in a good enough area, and I need to furnish a few of the units anyways, just to show them as a model. And I'm like, why don't we just go and throw these on Airbnb and see if we
yeah.
can generate, instead of $800 a month in rent or $700 a month in rent, can we get 2,000? Can we get 2,500? And if we can, like that can really juice our numbers. So what if I took a 100 unit building, I took 10 units or 15 of the units and put them on Airbnb, and I could,
Certainly.
double, triple the amount of rent that we're bringing into those? Does it make sense? Yes. I think it could. Do you have anybody doing anything like that right now?
Um, Very, very few, if any. And the reason is because most of my students, most of the people that go through my program do not own commercial real estate. And
Yeah.
so when you approach somebody, like if I were to approach you and you own commercial real estate, it'd be very difficult to convince you to take some of your units, especially if your policies on that building say that the tenants can't do it, then it'd be very
Yep.
difficult for you to then go do it, in
Yep.
violation of that policy. So a lot of times, unless you own the unit. I have had some people reach out to me like you that own commercial properties, and they said, I'm going to try this with my own property. But as
Hmm.
far as pitching it to someone else who owns the property, it's very difficult to do because you're trying to get them to essentially change what they already do. And most of these
Hmm.
larger commercial properties, I've tried to pitch them and they're like, we just cannot. That's not our policy for
Yeah.
the way we run our properties and stuff. And we just can't do it. So, but you as the owner, you have the ability
Yeah.
to change the rules or do what you want. So is there potential? Yes, I think there is. It's just not something I teach because I'm not talking to people like yourself generally.
Yeah. And I think obviously I have enough units where I can justify it and have the scale of hiring one person in house to just handle all that stuff for
Yeah.
me, or putting all those automations in place. But I guess the other option that I could have is just find somebody like one of your students to come in and say, hey, I got this 15 unit apartment building. How about I just give you the whole thing? You guarantee me all the rents, no vacancy, and
Hmm.
just pay me $1,000 a month per unit. You keep
Yep.
everything above that. Like, that's a pretty smoking deal for me, and it's a good deal for whoever the Airbnb student is too.
Well,
So,
this is the same. This is exactly the same conversation I've been having with Grant Cardone. He owns, I think, like 7,000 units or something. He's got a $1 billion plus portfolio, and
mhm.
we're talking about taking on some of his buildings to do some test pilot units, whatever you want to call it. We just take one unit of some of these buildings and test them out and see how they do. So, because he's never tried that, he's only done the traditional
Yeah,
long-term model. So it's something that's still evolving, but the biggest hang up there would just be the fact that if you have a policy that favors the owner but does not allow others to do it, I don't know how that would work, because you're basically telling the tenants you can't do it, but I can do it as the owner. I don't know how that would work, so I don't know.
I, I
I'm
think you're
not
okay to do
familiar enough
that,
with how the
right?
bylaws work on
Yeah,
big like that.
I think you could, but I don't know. How about financing on these things? So one of the things I've learned in considering doing the Airbnb and stuff on my apartment buildings is the the lenders don't look at Airbnb income as predictable income. So
Yeah,
they're
because
taking
there's
those
no
15
lease, right?
units.
Yeah.
Right, they're taking those 15 units, they're saying that they're vacant, right? So I have to lease them all out on market rate rents in order to then refinance and put long-term debt in place. And then once I have the long-term debt, because my model is buy an apartment building, fix it all up, put good tenants in place, put good management in place, and then refinance it in 12 to 18 months, cash out my
Pull their
investors.
money out. Yeah.
Yep, and then I just have, bank financing in place, and or agency debt, which is Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then after that point, then I could put the Airbnb renters in place,
Yeah.
and then juice the rents that way. But is Airbnb? I heard they were coming out with their own financing, so people can buy condos and they can buy units and houses, and justify the financing based on those different types of rents, or having Airbnb
Yeah.
renters in place.
They are moving into that. They're moving into developing their own properties and that kind of thing. But I am not familiar with what those programs are right now.
What it's going to
Yeah.
look like. Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting, dude. Cool,
Yeah.
man. Well, this has been very, very insightful. I appreciate you being here and sharing all the knowledge. I got
Sure.
two questions for you.
Yeah.
One, actually, I have three questions for you. One is, how can people connect with you?
Sure. Okay. Well, the best way to find me, you can find me personally on social media, and my handle is at bpagester. That's at BPAGESTER, at bpagester, and that's on Instagram, Facebook, wherever. And my training is called BnB Formula, just like Airbnb,
Mm-hmm.
BnBFormula.com. And then if you want to check out my book, I got it behind me here. I got a book that it basically explains all the numbers. It tells you how much I'm making, how I got my first properties, the whole story, how I was able to scale. Goes through exactly how I built my business. And you can get that at brianpagebook.com, brianpagebook.com, if you want to check that out. And that's probably the best ways to find out
Awesome,
more.
dude. Good
Yeah,
stuff. So now I wanna ask you this. What's the best financial advice? This is Legacy Wealth Show, right? What's the best financial advice that you've ever received?
the best advice I ever received, I did not take, and had I taken it, I would not have lost everything in the crash. And so now I've taken it to heart, which is two words: asset allocation.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is you should never be invested in just one asset class. So for me, that was real estate. And when the real estate bubble popped, everything I had was tied up in real estate or somehow indirectly tied to real estate. I
Mhm.
wasn't in any other market. I wasn't in stocks. I wasn't in bonds. I wasn't in precious metals. I wasn't in uh, cash significantly. I didn't have other asset classes. So when you start understanding there's all kinds of different asset classes, and it's okay to make money in one asset class, but you should invest into others so that when there's a downturn, you're protected.
Mhm.
So as an example, I'm not going to go too far down this rabbit hole, but I'm definitely a precious metals guy. And had I just put 10% of my net worth into gold or gold and silver at the time before the crash, I would have lost nothing.
Mm.
So that was an example. And I was not investing at all in the stock market, so I missed the huge bull run that we had after everything settled, and we're still in. So I would say if you're making money, you have assets, make sure they're not in one asset class. That is very, very, very important, because an asset class can crash, and that wealth will be transferred to some other asset class. So you might as well be have your eggs in different baskets, I guess. You can, although you make your eggs and earn your eggs in one basket.
Awesome, man. I appreciate that. What is the Legacy Wealth Show? What does legacy wealth mean to Brian Page?
Legacy wealth, I would say, legacy has more to do with the impact that you have on others in the globe and the world than just your bank account. So if you die the richest man in the world, that's not really an achievement. But if you have a huge impact on others and improving the world through your wealth, that is a huge achievement. So I think legacy is a word that goes way beyond net worth or numbers or any of that kind of thing, into like why are you here? Like, what's the point? Like, if you're going to make a bunch of money, what's the point? What are you going to do with it other than just take care of yourself or your own? That's what I think. So I have reasons that I want to make money that are way beyond personal reasons or for myself. And those are the things that drive me. That's what I want my legacy to be about.
Love it, man. I agree 100%. So awesome. Brian, appreciate you being here, brother. Thank you so much.
Yes,
ton of awesome insight. And I think it really gets a lot of people's wheels turning, thinking about just looking at things from a different angle. Like everybody, a lot of people just have an old school mindset, especially into commercial real estate. And you realize there's some things that you can do to really increase the numbers and the gross revenue. And like, you're paying for the taxes and the insurance and the utilities and all those kinds of things on that unit anyways, or on that property anyways. Like, if you can get 3 times the amount of gross rents, a lot of that goes straight to the bottom line. So it's impactful stuff, man. Really gets the wheels turning. So, dude, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you guys. Make sure that you guys connect with Brian on social media, go to his websites, check out his course. I did it, very valuable, and really helped out with just even if you don't implement or do the whole Airbnb thing, like, just get your wheels turning and starts thinking about things from a different angle and see what other people are doing out there. And eventually, it's another tool in the work shed. So awesome, brother. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you guys. Until next time, see you guys on the Legacy Wealth Show.